Hi, I'm Simon, and today I'm going to be talking about plate tectonics using this deck of cards. Plate tectonics are essentially the study of how different plates interact with each other. So there are 9 different major plates floating around the world, which I'm going to represent using these cards here. So a plate is either it makes up either a continent or an ocean, and is made up of the lithosphere, which is the super hard kind of shell that's just above the mantle. So if you imagine that these are oceans and continents, and these are the plates that are underneath them, they kind of move around. And there's a lot that affects them moving around. It affects how they interact with one another. Also the poles and magnetization affects how they move and where they move. So for the world's entire history, these plates have been moving around. And in fact, they're still moving around today, and they just look like, when we look at the map, it seems familiar. But millions and millions and billions of years ago, there were different continents and different supercontinents like Pangaea or Rodinia, which were it was the same structure to the Earth, but it looked a whole lot different. And so plate tectonics is how those plates interact with each other. And so I'm going to use this deck of cards to give you a little information about how they interact. There's 3 major ways they interact, and these are called margins. And those 3 ways are divergent plate margins, convergent plate margins, and transform fault plate margins. So the first one is the divergent plate margin, which is essentially what happens when 2 different plates, represented by these 2 stacks of cards, interact when they're moving away from each other. So you can imagine that these are 2 plates that are next to each other. What happens when they move away from each other? So there are a couple different things that could happen, but this is how most oceans are formed, is formed out of a convergent plate margin interaction. So when these plates are up against each other and they move away from each other, it creates a basin in between. This can also happen when these 2 plates are pushed down and away from each other, creating mountain and sea kind of topographies like we see in Southern California here. The next way that plates interact is the convergent plate margin, which is the exact opposite. It's how plates interact when they're coming together. So we often see that one plate, especially the denser plate, will react with the less dense plate and kind of move it out of its way. Just kind of like a stronger force will move a weaker force in a physical altercation or on the sports field or something like that. So we'll see that oftentimes 2 plates that are coming together, the stronger one, represented by more cards here, fewer, will come and hit the other plate and actually push it down. And this is one way. This is called a subduction zone. Another way that these plates in a convergent plate margin interact is that they'll actually meet and push up, and we see really striking, beautiful mountain ranges come out of that, just like the Himalayas in Asia are a convergent plate margin. So, and the final way is a transform fault plate margin. And so this is slightly different because this is what happens when 2 plates are side by side and they strike each other, they strike and slide each other, just like that. And that's what we're on right now in Southern California is this type of plate, the transform fault plate margin, where we see lots of earthquakes here on the Pacific coast. And we see it all around the Ring of Fire, around the Pacific Ocean, where there's lots of earthquakes, lots of really catastrophic earthquakes, and lots of volcano eruptions, which when these plates strike and slide next to each other, it allows for volcanoes to erupt and magma to be released into the world, which unfortunately creates a lot of destruction. But if you've heard of the San Andreas Fault, which we're on right now, that's what this type of fault is. So I hope you learned something today. I hope using this deck of cards, it made life a little bit easier in understanding these plates and these plates margins.